A client who is very worried because she had a long-standing client for years, good client, amazing relationship, and now the organization decides to reorg. And as part of that reorg, everything changes. Her contacts are not there anymore. They either have moved on, have different jobs. The key departments that you work with are, in different, branches of the organization. And so when that happens, very often the new people that come in, they want to bring in their own vendors and their own resources and their own way of doing things. And suddenly, a dominant client with a significant amount of revenue for the consultant is about to leave. And so that can be very nerve-wracking. That happened to me in 2016, where one of my clients went through a reorg, and the new team, for whatever reason, decided to have a hostile approach to it. Did a lot of things in the background behind my back, including hiring some of my 1099 resources. And that was the one paragraph in the contract that I didn't understand at the time, that I signed, because it was just myself. But then I grew and I built up those resources, and at 50, 1099s. And then I realized that when it was time to renew their contracts, they wouldn't sign it. And so sure enough, the team decided behind my back to hire away all of those 1099s. And I was left with, the loss of revenue and loss of the resources that I've had. Yes, in order to deliver services to other clients. So it almost broke my company. It was so close. I had to let go of a lot of people and so on. So this client of mine this morning has the same fears, right? Because that happens, when that happens, it's bad. So here is my advice for you, what you can do so that it doesn't happen to you. All right. So when you let me show that to you here. So when you look at the consultants trifecta, the legal trifecta, there are three things that we would like to define in a relationship with our client. The first one is we need to protect our business. Second, we need to provide clarity on what kind of services we provide, what the deliverables are, what the scope is, and so on. And we need to set expectations on how we deliver. So what's the code of conduct, right? As we go and work together. So most consultants, they do understand that they need to have some kind of contract that may either be a master services agreement or master work agreement or professional services agreement, or just the terms and conditions. Whatever you call it, there are legal implications for all three of them. And I'm not a legal counsel, so I cannot advise you on this one. So you would need to talk to your lawyers, attorneys, or other legal professionals, what you want to do and what's best for you. It's also a business decision, but you need to protect yourself with some kind of contract that determines, who's responsible for what, that you get indemnified. They want to identify you. They want you to identify them. Confidentiality agreements, non-solicitation agreements, and all of that, right? So meaning the right to contact your client's clients and vice versa. So when it comes to clarity, that's the statement of work. And statement of work is a document that define. Most people get this wrong. Their statement of works are very, very generic, and they are not defined in terms of scope, for example. And then the client has a totally different understanding of what is required, and add to it, and you feel that it's scope creep, and then you have that conversation, and that creates unnecessary tension. So why not be clear and solve that in advance, right? And when it comes to expectations, and that's what most consultants don't do, is a service level agreement. So a service level agreement defines how you work together. For example, what happens when your client is an international organization and they have, let's say, an office in Germany, and during Thanksgiving, you as an American consultant, you at Thanksgiving, that team requires support from you. So what happens, right? And we always assume like it's Thanksgiving, so everybody's off. No, it's not. What do you do when they have a Chinese department that you work with, and they go on vacation for Chinese New Year, and you cannot perform your work because nobody answers the calls, right, or the emails. So that's what's covered in the SLA. So I would like to give you a few examples of what you can do, right? So number one is here. So that's a contract. And by the way, if you are interested in getting some of those templates, let me know. I will let you know how you can get them, okay? Um, so, of course, I need to start that with a legal disclaimer. I'm not going to go into details here right now, but um, so again, I'm not a legal professional. Whatever you do, um, have it checked by a lawyer, right? So everything I do here is for educational purposes and not for legal advice. But I do want you to understand the importance of those documents. So the first one is like a consulting agreement, and I don't going to go into details, but you do cover, how long the contract is, the determination, the compensation, how you get paid, that you're not an employee, that you're independent, all of that. How you handle trademarks and copyrights on your end and their end, and what you're allowed to do and not to do, and use their trademarks, of course, confidentiality and so on. And what you do once the contract is over, and so on. So I'm not going to go into details, but you can have let me know if you want the templates, and I will share that with you, okay? Or I will let you know how you can get them. So that's one. Then we have this statement of work, and the statement of work is right here, down here, there we go. And here's an example statement of work where you really, most people, like, you don't write like proposals and statements of work that are pages long. Mine are like a page, maximum of two, okay? Here's an example. If you provide that kind of clarity, you don't need more than that, okay? So here, for example, we have a statement of work for a proof of concept, and in particular piece of software to see if it works for the client and helps them to streamline the operation there around producing InDesign documents, okay? And so what you want to cover is the activities that you do, the scope. And here's already where most consultants fall flat, right? They don't scope it well enough so that they give the client a lot of opportunities to put more work in and call you later. Say, oh, by the way, I also forgot that there's that person you need to talk to, and this product here that is relevant. Can you look at that as well? And then it's difficult, or more difficult than if you had a statement of work, to negotiate the rate and then say, oh yeah, I can do this, but that will cost extra and will take extra time. If you do not have that conversation, then there's a misalignment between expectations, and that causes friction, which you don't want. For example, here's like 5 files, 2 languages they look at, and they look at a certain database, right? In a specific condition. So what is the success criteria that you want from that proof of concept? What are the key deliverables? My advice here is never, ever, 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 ever write a report. Nobody pays you for report writing, okay? Unless you're one of the big 4, and then you pay, I don't know, like, they pay them like tens of thousands of dollars for a report. If you are a smaller consulting firm or just by yourself, they're not going to pay that, very rare, right? So what you do is give it a PowerPoint presentation, and if they want more data, well, give them the Excel files. So that's how I would do it. And then there are some assumptions, which also in statement of work documents that I see from consultants are very, very, if they're there at all, very, very rare. But you cannot, for example, do your job if the customer is not available, if they don't give you the data that you need, if you do not have a contact point and an escalation point, and you may have access to their software, for example, or any other material that you need. Okay, so that's those are the assumptions, and then of course the terms and the cost. But my the, where things really fall flat is, again, most consultants have that um, covered okay, at least okay-ish to some degree. But where relationships fall flat is actually in the day-to-day work. Again, when you're available, what business hours are we talking about? Eastern, Central, Mountain, Pacific, uh, in Europe, right? Central European Standard Time, uh, and so on. When does the business day end? What's the response time? How long does it take for you to give a call back or to deliver anything? So that's in the service level agreement. And usually in the beginning of a conversation, that shifts on sometimes on a daily, if not, but at least weekly or monthly basis, as the relationship matures, and we also understand the true scope of the document and the chaos on the client side, and what they know and they don't know and what's not working. So that document is typically not legally binding, but it is an understanding between the two parties of what yeah, how we work together. For example, you have business days. You have issues like, if they ask for a quote, how long it's going to take you. Um, how long will it take to respond, to acknowledge, and what happens when you're late. Okay, what about the deliverables? How will they be delivered? By via FTP, via a vendor portal, via email, all of that. How do you report? Is it an Excel sheet? Is it access to a reporting module in your software, for example? So all of that needs to be clarified, so that when there's an issue, nobody can say we didn't talk about it. And usually when it's a verbal agreement, people understand agreements totally differently. And when things go wrong, then it gets to the like you said, I said conversation, which we would like to avoid. And by the way, just a little of a tip: if you um, decide or agree that you deliver something by Friday before 5 p.m., and in your head it's 9 a.m. on Monday morning because you have the weekend, um, don't do that, because the client may have put away some time over the weekend to review your deliverables to give you feedback on Monday. And when they don't get it, they can get very upset. Also, it takes away from your trustworthiness and your reliability that they have in their head. All right. So avoid that by all means. But you also want to define what the client needs to do in order for you to be successful and do your work. In this case, here, for example, it's very, very detailed. We're talking about error categories and all of that, and weighing and so on, and what you will not perform uh, uh, if your client gives you feedback. Yes. So the more specific you are, the better. Sometimes you want to be a little bit vague because you cannot yeah, put like a finger on everything and the criteria on anything. But the more precise you are, the better. So also, what are the acceptance criteria, and what does how long does the client have to accept what you're doing? Because you don't want them to come back like 3 months later and say, we finally had the opportunity to look at your deliverables, and here's the list of grievances that we have, right? You give them 30 days, and if after 30 days they for or 14 days, whatever this is for you, and then if then the time is over, it's accepted. You can always make it an exception depending on the relation of the client, but at least you have that in writing, and you can always say, look, we did agree on this, but I love you and therefore I do it, right? Or I do it and I charge you more. And uh, another thing that you want to cover is the escalation path and the contacts. When you work with larger organizations, you may have the business manager, the director, senior director, VP as your primary contact. Um, They may designate somebody to manage that contract for them. Either way, what happens when you are getting at an impasse with that person? You want access to the skip level the next level manager or the skip level manager um, in writing right now, so that you can always um, make that jump if you wanted to, and ask that person's manager to mediate. And once it's in writing, it's okay, because when it's in writing, they've already agreed to that, and it's very clear. If you don't put it in writing and they said that in passing, and then you do it, and then they get upset about it, now it's the burden is on you to prove that that was actually the agreement. Don't do this, so either. And reporting requirements. Let's talk about that real quick. Every client is different. It depends on their personal preferences, how they work, the way how they uh, gather and share information, but also the level of personal and professional organization. And so some people may want like a detailed Excel sheet at the end of the week. Um, you need to make that decision if that's worth your time. Um, I would, if it's quick, fine. If it takes too much time, you may want to find something else. But you also want to have certain points, touch points in the relationship where you talk about the relationship. And the one touch point that I suggest you put into the service level agreement is a quarterly business review, and that quarterly business review covers, um, you know, um, what items did we discuss in our last QBR, if applicable, and where are we? But you also want to talk about spend versus PO. For example, if they told you, I'm going to give you $100,000 of work in the next quarter, and you only got 10, can be a problem, not just for you profitably, but also you have resources lined up that are idle otherwise, for example, and that's an opportunity to discuss that. The spend breakdown, what kind of services, suggestion for improvement, new action items, and wrap up. That will be a minimal viable agenda for the QBR. So my suggestion to you is look at all the three documents. If you want the templates here from me, uh, send me a note, send me an email, DM me. I'll be happy to share with you how you can access them. And then once you have them, do have review those documents yourself, because you may have totally different requirements, but at least you have a guideline of what to put in, and then go and seek out a legal professional to advise you further. Because if I know if I know one thing, that legalese is like super boring, and people like us who want to deliver results to clients, we very easily forget or lose track or misinterpret and or skip over, and then client reorgs, we get hit like a deer in the headlights. Okay, so yeah, send me an email, right, and I will let you know how to get access to those templates. All right. um, have a good rest of the week and weekend, everybody, or whenever you watch this. Okay, have enjoy. Bye. Where is my finish button here? Bye.